Hey, this is Rick Renner, and today I want to answer part 2 to the question which we started yesterday. Someone sent me a great question about the word superfluity in James 1:21. It says, "Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness." That's what we covered yesterday. If you didn't see it, you ought to go see it. Lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness. And we saw yesterday that word filthiness is the word riparion, and it describes a man that is filthy dirty. His clothes are so dirty, his clothes are encrusted. This is like a homeless person. I mean, just stinks to high heaven. You walk in the room, you ought to put your hand on your nose because the smell is so bad. And James says that's what bad attitudes do to you. He calls it filthiness, and if you don't get a grip on it, he says it goes on to become, here it is, superfluity of naughtiness. Well, you can tell I'm in an airport. But what does that word superfluity mean? The word superfluity describes something that becomes so abundant that it begins to flow out of its banks. It just begins to flow out of its banks. When I was a boy, my grandfather Miller lived on the banks of a creek in Oklahoma which was called Bird Creek. And back in those days, Bird Creek, about once a year, would flow out of its banks. Bird Creek was awful. I mean, it was like a slime pit. It was so dirty. And when Bird Creek would come out of its banks, everything got slimed. I mean, just slimed. And I can remember my granddad calling us saying, "Come get me." My dad and I would get in the boat. We'd ride down the highway in the boat because it was a flood, down to my granddad's house, and there he and his wife would be standing on the porch, standing in all this superfluity of naughtiness. That word naughtiness, the word kakos, describes something foul, something just so foul. And you know that usually that word kakos has to do with demonic activity. And I truly believe James is telling us, if we don't get a grip on the bad attitudes in our life, eventually those bad attitudes, they never stay at the same level. They get worse and worse and worse and worse and build and build and build and build until finally they begin to seep out and affect others that are near us. Your attitude can affect your spouse. It can affect your family. It can affect your friends. Until finally it's naughtiness, the word kakos, a word which is often used for something foul or something filled with stench, demonic activity. Your bad attitude, if you don't get a grip on it, will open the door and will invite demonic activity into your business, into your family, into your heart. That is why it is so very essential that you don't allow superfluity of naughtiness. You don't let your bad attitudes get so out of control that you begin to slime everything around you, slime all of your friends. You begin to create your own weather, as it were. Everywhere you go, you carry a foul storm until finally the devil sees this as an opportunity to be attracted and to invade, and then you've really got a serious situation on your hands. So superfluity of naughtiness is pretty serious. But James goes on to say, instead receive with meekness the engrafted word, which is able to save your soul. That's what I want to talk to you about tomorrow. Boy, this was such a great question about superfluity of naughtiness. What does it mean when the Bible says receive with meekness the engrafted word? What is the engrafted word? And what does it mean when it says it has the power to save your soul? That's what we're going to look at tomorrow. But for today, that's enough for you to think about.